Victor Chu is the chairman of the First Eastern Investment Group. Sam Gyimah is a former member of parliament and runs a consultancy which looks at the intersection between geopolitics, culture, and a whole gamut of other things. And Kjell is a former prime minister of Norway, and let's be careful here, he is an ordained minister. So here we go. Right, gentlemen, we are going to start off with, isn't humanity always being rewritten? You know, you've got changes in technology from the Industrial Revolution to the Renaissance. Surely, why are we having this conversation? When I actually looked at the title, I thought, what a load of nonsense. But then the more and more I thought about it, I thought, actually, it's very, very good. And I'm going to ask Sam to kick this one up. What do you know and what do you think of humanity, and what do you make of humanity being rewritten? Why should it be different this time?
I think at some level you're absolutely right. Artificial intelligence is going to have a transformational effect, but there are other general purpose technologies that have done that. Take computing, take electricity. So why should this be different? And where I go to is there's a gentleman called Geoffrey Hinton, who is a British computer scientist and widely acknowledged as the godfather of AI. Geoffrey comes from a long line of mathematicians and scientists. I think one of his forefathers is George Everest. Mount Everest was named after him, so hugely accomplished. He recently left Google, and the reason why he left is he was really worried about some of the downsides of what AI could do. For the first time, it appears that mankind has got this technology that could be more intelligent than us. And if it could be more intelligent than us, it could do things that threaten us. And that is the sense in which that is where the real fear comes from people like Geoffrey Hinton, who have been working on this for about 50 years. But when you speak to common people, they're worried about other things, their jobs being taken away. That is the more prosaic way in this manifests itself. So yes, humanity has always been rewritten. There is huge potential here, but you can see why people are concerned about some of the downsides if not managed appropriately.
Victor.
I think Sam is right, because we never had a stage where what is now called technological singularity, and that is at a time where the collection of human wisdom is being overwhelmed by technological advance. And also, humanity depends on a global collaboration where people see eye to eye, collaborate on major challenges of today and tomorrow. All the big problems of today and tomorrow requires global collaboration. And when you have the polarization of geopolitics, where some big boys are not seeing eye to eye, we need to be careful that technological advance in silo without a global guardrail could trigger unintended consequences. And that's why this time may be different.
Kjell.
Yes.
What did you think when you first saw the title?
I reacted on the title, Rewriting Humanity, that it's in a way too dramatic. Because the core of humanity is our hearts. So from a more philosophic perspective, I would refer to a Norwegian writer, Sigrid Undset, and she said, the heart of the human beings do not really change through all days. But of course, new technology change our lives. But that is for me different than humanity, because the core of humanity is our hearts. And we know, as indicated by you, Moderator, that we are flexible to meet new challenges and new technologies. The Industrial Revolution, of course, the data and internet revolution. And it's no doubt that we now especially face new challenges with regard to AI and genetic engineering. But I do believe that we will handle this to the benefit of people. But it requires something from us. It requires ethical guidelines, both for us as individuals, the business life, from politicians, and it will also require some regulations, I think, both on national level and on international level. But if we are able to meet these requirements, we can do this in a way that will benefit people, but we have to listen to concerns from common people.
Exactly what Sam was saying. And so what we get to is ethics, morality, and challenges therein. Now, with new technologies, and I don't want to bang on about AI because everybody has done, and I want to just say, how do we regulate it and put civil society at the forefront of this, perhaps? Victor?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need a multi-stakeholders approach. I think we cannot just rely on the normal government process, because institutions of government work gradually. It reacts to situation, whereas today's challenges needs a lot of forward thinking. And therefore, I think civil society, universities, and think tanks might probably be able to convene the discussions a lot more readily and really prepare our political leaders to make policy judgments. We need 3 H's, I think: humility, honor, and humanity. I think these are the key themes that we need to think about.
Kjell?
Yes, I do agree with you, and I think civil society is crucial here, because we cannot regulate everything. We cannot regulate everything with regard to the new technology. We have to meet the challenges by ethical values, and these core values, I think, in this regard, is, for instance, human dignity, respect for every individual being. I will also say empathy and compassion is of great importance in this regard. We need some national regulations, we need some international regulations and standards. For instance, I think UN has to be more engaged.
Yeah.
WTO, World Trade Organizations, have to be engaged, and we have to use education, where every pupil and student learn about this new technologies, and not only the possibilities, but also the threats and concerns. So they are ready to meet these challenges. And for me, especially, genetic engineering is a matter of concern. What does it mean? What does it mean for handicapped people? Do we allow a society where people are living with Down syndrome or not, for instance? So we have to be careful in what direction we are going.
Sam, are you quite uniquely placed in a way, because you were a government minister in the UK and you talked about, well, you had a brief which included higher education. On top of that, of course, science and research, and you had a budget of £8 billion or something like that for R&D.
8.6 billion R&D budget, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So what do you do with that money?
Well, a lot of a publicly funded research is around blue sky thinking. The ideas that scientists pursue and do not even know what's going to come out of it. And the UK is particularly good at research. If you look at that's not just because I'm patriotic. I think if you look at scientific citations, the UK sort of punches way above its weight as the size of its country. But I want to go to something that you were saying earlier about this civil society and civil society at the heart of this. And I think we've got to recognize that, yes, we've had a lot of discussion about AI over the last 2 days, and FII is doing a lot specifically on that. I was at a conclave discussing this yesterday here in Hong Kong. But AI is different. It's different because...
I knew you'd say that.
Because of the competitive advantage that it could give to countries. I mean, it could improve productivity by something like 3.3%. That's about 25 trillion globally. But it also cuts into national security, defense, and a whole lot of other areas. But in terms of putting civil society at the heart of it, there is a huge gulf in understanding of the technology, what it can do today, what it could do tomorrow, and what those risks potentially are.
Exactly. What we saw with the dot-com boom, and we've always been trying to catch up.
Yes.
And can we get ahead of this?
And speaking sort of as a former politician, what I always knew when I dealt with people from the tech communities, I recognized that they didn't really understand government as much as they thought they did, but we understood what they were doing even less. And that gulf of understanding needs to be bridged, because the pressure on politicians to respond, to regulate, to do things, can only work if politicians actually understand what these technologies are. Otherwise, they go to big tech and they're like, can you tell us what to do? Which is kind of not the right way around. And I think, therefore, to put civil society or anyone at the heart of this, we do need to find a way where objectively we understand what the technology is, where it's going, what the downsides are, how do you have management of it, how do you have oversight of it, what do you license? And that is what was discussed, for example, at the AI summit in the UK. And we're only beginning to outline what the framework internationally could be.
So Sam, I mean, so what would happen if we just allowed everything here to grow organically? All three of you, chime in, please. If you just let it go and what would happen?
Well, I think this is one of those areas where we just don't know. But the potential downsides are incredibly worrying. So if you take we've seen in the last few years what social media can do and the algorithms can do, and I don't think anyone predicted the kind of polarization that it could engender in the way that it has. So I think we have a fair idea that things could go badly. We don't know what bad actors could do with these language models. You know, you trained on, say, the dark web. So I think we can't be blasé about this. I think we've got to be responsible. And in the last year, I think what we've seen is electrifying progress in terms of whether it's ChatGPT 4, and a couple of days ago I saw Google's release Gemini. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing and therefore positive what it can do. But I think the responsible thing to do is also to manage the potential downsides.
I was going to say that our starting point must be that we should embrace on technological advance, because that if it's approached properly, it helps humanity, and it helps the global south. It helps to mitigate the injustice and the inequality that we face. But how to do it properly, responsibly, and with global consensus on implementation of these principles is really the key. And that needs to be addressed fairly upfront. And the way to do it is, I think, really through civil society. And because politics is local, so you need a lot of local, grassroots buy-in in order to make our leaders, to give the right attention.
Let me just, in this framework, also mention another threat or a possibility, and that is for democracy. I'm thinking especially of the threat of fake news, which is a real problem of today. It's an increasing problem. And what will the new technology and AI especially do with that? Is it possible to get help from AI to avoid fake news? Or will it increase the problem? And if it's increasing, it will be a new threat to democracy, because democracy requires true, fair information and not fake news and misunderstandings. So I think this is also a matter that people who are advanced in AI should deal more with.
Yeah, I mean, democracy, as Churchill said, is the least worst form of government we know of. Victor, I mean, we do live in a time, though, where we are, of course, as we say, changing, and I call it the 3Ds. We're going through deglobalization to some extent, decarbonization, and we also have a demographic problem as well. How does that shape this whole conversation about humanity?
I think that really requires, as I mentioned, I think the dialogue between the global village is so urgent. And it's not just dialogue. We need to come up with principles pretty quickly, because from dialogue to principles to actual legislation and implementation, it takes time. And technology is running at an exponential speed. Therefore, education, teaching the teachers to make sure that they implant the honor, the ethics into the students on a worldwide basis is also important.
Kjell?
Yeah, I do agree on that. But when you talk about demography, it is
Aging populations in particular, of course.
Pardon?
Aging populations.
Yes, and this is really a challenge. If AI especially, and modern technology generally, will create new differences between
The half
us who are
Yeah.
elderly people
Yeah.
and the younger. So I see it in my own family, of course. If I have a technical problem, I call upon my grandchildren, and they help me. And and this will be an increasing challenge in the years ahead of us. So what can we do to involve also us who are older in the new technology and how we can handle it, the situation? That is a challenge. It's not a question only about education in schools. It's a question about educating elderly people.
Yes.
And in Norway, we try to do this because we have some organizations for elderly people, we have some academies for elderly people, and new technology now is an important subject in these frameworks.
Spinning Jenny was very important as well back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
I think your point about demography, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, go on.
I sat through some of the earlier events today, and mainly on healthcare and the rapid advances in healthcare. And it's very interesting how a number of the speakers talked about health span rather than lifespan. And at the heart of health span, which is being able to live long and live well,
That's
rapid
still...
advances in technology that
Yep.
AI is going to help drive. And I think that tells you your demographic challenge. It could really help having people living longer, healthier lives, which is what we need. And the cost of drug discovery, the cost of running trials reduces dramatically using these algorithms. And I'm on the board of Oxford University Innovation, where a lot of this work is being done at the university, and they're spinning out technologies. And I think that is tremendously exciting. On the deglobalization side, I think what we've got to be careful is that the competition, national competition to get an edge in this technology because of the huge benefits, doesn't lead to a situation where some nations have it. You have the have-nots, the haves and the have-nots in terms of nations, particularly developing countries that don't have access to these
also
technologies.
different types of that technology as well. It's
Exactly.
not a uniform being, is it, or thing?
Yeah, and if you have a situation where obviously the superpowers have it, some countries that have great scientific bases have it, but if you're in the global south, as you mentioned, and you don't have access to these technologies, so you're trading market access for technology, how does that work? And that inequity is something that we need to really think about in the context of globalization.
Another word which gets bandied about, or two words which get bandied about, is human equity. What do you understand by that?
Very much following to what Sam said, I think we have to be very careful that socially is unacceptable if, for example, if there were to be a cure on dementia, the global south is not benefiting from that. At the end of the day, I think there are many challenges we have, but one of the most serious challenge is resource competition and resource security. And by resource, I mean including, not just the hard resource, but also technology and medical technology. So, I mean, in the last 20 years, we always talk about, the internet and the have and have not. Now we talk about energy, healthcare, and also the advanced AI. So we must not allow a situation where part of the world is so far ahead, then the other part of the world have no chance of catching up. That will be the beginning of the end of humanity.
Kofi Annan made you special humanitarian envoy to the Horn of Africa, so you know a bit about the Global South. How does the Global South then actually enter this conversation? How does it have itself heard?
This is really one of the great challenges with regard to the new technology. I'm concerned about the threat that developing countries will be lagging behind with regard to taking advantage of the new technologies. So there we need really international regulations to bring them on board, and that we can be sure that developing countries also will have advantages of these new technologies. And therefore, I will emphasize the two main challenges with regard to all development in developing countries, namely health and education. Health and education. I always repeat, health and education. Without health, you can do nothing. Without education, it's very limited what you can do, and especially in this regard, with regard to the modern technology. But if you have some basic education, you can not only take part, but also contribute to the development for your own family and for your local community and for your nation. And this is one of the main challenges. Therefore, I mean that we have to engage international organizations in this regard, so we don't face a new area where the developing countries are lagging behind, and that will increase the differences in the world between the rich and the poor part of our world. Yeah. We have to pay attention to this.
I think a couple of things around. I mean, we know the resources that, whether it's computing technology, whether it's talent, whether it's the physical infrastructure, all of that underpins it and being sucked in by the countries that can afford to get a leading edge. But there's another aspect of the equity that I am particularly concerned about, which is if you take the world of finance, to give an example where AI can be deployed at scale. If this is being developed by, a couple of people in Silicon Valley, to take an example, in their garage, say, or unlikely given how much power they need, and it doesn't recognize, or it operates in such a way that it's systematically biased. So certain people with certain characteristics can't get a loan because of the way the algorithms operate. That's inequitable. So this the way the algorithms are not impartial, independent, operating. They are built by humans and built to do certain things. So part of the equity issue is making sure that the way they operate actually does help people. And same in the medical space, what kind of illnesses are you training it to deal with rather than others? So all of these areas are areas where we do need to think about making sure that it delivers for all, and it just doesn't just reflect our biases and interests.
Yes.
But Victor, somebody's got to pay for all of this as well. I mean, you can't rely on governments, and of course it's better if you have something, maybe Adam Smith's invisible hand could be at work here as well. How do you make an investment which, A, has a decent return, but also a decent return in terms of what we're talking about, in terms of being morally and ethically positive, perhaps, and being good for the rest of the community and then humanity?
Yes, I think we are getting there. I think there is a widespread recognition that we are not in the 70s or the 80s. Shareholders' objective is not to really maximize just pure financial return. We must look at financial return in the context of the overall societal return, social impact. And I think the younger generation are much wiser than we are. And if you talk to our student unions, that's the number one priority. They want us to look for impact. As a Liverpool football fan to a Spurs fan, we never walk alone. Right? We are in the global village, and we rise and fall together. COVID was a good example. Until the rest of the world is safe, nobody's safe.
Do you think we became more humanistic because of COVID?
Yeah, I think we have. And we have. And you will see in the next few years, one of the effects of long COVID is a recognition that despite all the geopolitical rhetorics, we have to bring the pendulum back to the middle and really stimulate a lot more collaboration. Now, for example, you were saying that if we allow technology to do without any collaboration and guidelines, we're wasting so much resources and duplicating. Right? If Harvard is doing something and Oxford is doing something, UCL is doing something, we are delaying the progress. If we can join forces, we can get the objective much quicker.
I'm convinced that the business companies that take most seriously the matters of concerns of common people will also be the business companies that will have greatest success in future. Because people will not only look after economic return of the investments, they will look upon a return of human values.
Who does that? Who does that?
Through.
Who does that?
Who get that?
Who does that? What you're talking about? In terms of looking at beyond the economic, or not looking at the economic return.
Yeah, the human return.
Okay.
And that is values that mean much to us in our daily life.
Yeah.
What does this mean for our relations in our families? What does this mean for our relations in the local community where we are living our lives? Human values. And those business companies that take this seriously, they will also succeed in this regard. And economically also, I'm sure, they will win in the longer perspective.
Sam, I mean, you founded a firm, an advisory firm, international one, which looks at, I think that it says here, an intersection of geopolitics, capital deployment, and government. So that makes...
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic area where the industrial policy makes a difference. It costs huge amounts of money to develop and train and deploy these models. And government action, but also private capital working together makes a difference. That's why we've seen in the US, the Chips and Science Act, for example. In China, there are billions being poured into this. In France, an AI company called Mistral, I think, raised at a valuation of hundreds of millions on the back of just its business plan without having developed anything yet. And I think all over the world, not just public funds, but also private capital is going into these technologies because of the huge transformative and beneficial effect it can have on the economy. And I do share the optimism that we are on the dawn of like a new age. And but at the same time, it's right to do that in a responsible way, and so that businesses that benefit don't just benefit because they've developed technology, but do it in a way that benefits society as well.
And this has also to do with the geopolitical situation in the world of today.
Geopolitics, of course.
Because we are now in China, Hong Kong, China, and for instance, the relations between China and the United States will be crucial in future. And I do hope that the leadership in both these countries and in the other big powers, European Union, in the Arab world, see and acknowledge that we will all benefit of acting together with regard to new technology, instead of only competing and having conflicts. So that is a message from my side, coming from a small country, that I hope that the greater nations will seize this opportunity for cooperating instead of conflicting.
Also one of the richest countries in the world, and nobody would have to work, actually, if they didn't want to.
Oh, yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Anyway, in conclusion, very, very quickly, guys, starting off, going down this way, Victor, are you excited about the future, and are you also feeling threatened by what's going on?
I think it has to be a bit of both. I agree with Sam. The technological advance will give humanity a lot of game-changing advantages, but we have to use it reasonably, properly, and responsibly.
I agree, Victor.
I agree also, but let me end up where I started, because the core of humanity is our hearts, and not our bodies, not our technology. But I do believe that if we tackle this new technology in good ways that we have talked about now, it will deepening and enriching the quality of humanity, our hearts. But the hearts of human beings, as I quoted a Norwegian writer, the hearts are not changing. Lives are changing.
And Germans, I was saying that the heart is on the left-hand side anyway. That's another story altogether. And let's not forget the old maxim from an old movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, just be excellent to each other. Victor Chu, thank you so much. Sam Gyimah, and of course, Kjell Bondevik there. Please give it up for them.
Thank you.
Okay.